It was a busy weekend in Birdland as we got the sale moving in the right direction once again. The O's named their opening day starter, and there was tons of good stuff to see on the field down in Florida as well. And we'll recap it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, March 11th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, I'm going to get you some Orioles news and notes from the weekend. We got some big news in the Orioles sale. While it's not finalized yet, we are basically one step away. The Orioles, while it wasn't a surprising move, named their opening day starter, and there were 4 spring training games since the last time we talked, a couple of them televised as well, one with StatCast data, and we'll dive into everything we know from the action on the field. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So let's jump into today's episode with what I think is the biggest news of the weekend for the Orioles. And that is that we are truly one step away from David Rubenstein being approved and being put in as the control person and owner of the Baltimore Orioles. The second biggest hurdle really was cleared on Friday night, first reported, unsurprisingly, by Bloomberg on Friday night, and then story corroborated by the Baltimore Sun, the Baltimore Banner, the Athletic, and others, that the MLB Ownership Committee, which is just kind of a smaller group among ownership that decides on some of these things, approved the sale of the Orioles from John Angelos to the group led by David Rubenstein. Now, the last step is basically the final step here, and the next step is all of the owners get together for a vote, and as long as 22 of the 29 other owners say yes to David Rubenstein, he will be the control person for the Orioles. Now, it wasn't as easy as, okay, right after that news breaks Friday night, they get together for the vote, but it's not as difficult as having to wait until the next owners meeting, which isn't until later this summer, or having to get everyone together in person. You can do, and they have done this kind of vote, virtually, which makes it a lot easier to get it done. Now, there's still going to be paperwork to go through and things to be put together. So it's not like, tonight, 2 days later, they are going to have this vote done. But with this hurdle crossed on Friday night, it is believable that David Rubenstein will be the owner of the Orioles before opening day. Not saying that is absolutely going to happen, but that is a strong possibility at this point. Essentially, as soon as they get all that paperwork together and find a time to do that virtual vote, as long as the O's get 22 of 29 other owners, and trust me, one of the big reasons why this process has gone so quickly is because they don't need to do as much of a vetting process for David Rubenstein. The other owners always vet every new owner in baseball, and he is such a publicly known billionaire because of how he donates his money and the fact that he is so well known, and he, hosts 2 shows on Bloomberg, and he worked in the White House at one point. Like, people know who David Rubenstein is. People know where his money came from. His, the Carlyle group that he worked with was so large as well and so well known that you don't have to do as much digging on someone who might be much more privately wealthy than someone like Rubenstein. And I can tell you, there's not a lot of things where these billionaires will vote against other billionaires taking these teams. And so the yes is just a formality, and that vote getting done at this point, again, it could get done by opening day. Now, as I record this, here's the other good thing. As I record this here right around 5 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday, March 10th, Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery are still free agents. And I'm not saying that David Rubenstein, could take over the team officially a week from now and would just immediately go out and offer Blake Snell, 5 years and $150 million. I don't think that would happen realistically. But it's more realistic than the Orioles getting Blake Snell with John Angelos still in charge. And maybe he would want to make a big splash. Now, I'm assuming Rubenstein will just kind of stick to the book with this. And then once we get trade deadline, open up the checkbook a little bit. And really, once we get to next offseason is most likely when we'll see things if payroll does really expand, we would probably first see it around this time next year. But maybe Scott Boras, who's been known to go over the heads of GMs and go directly to owners before, maybe he gets in the ear of David Rubenstein. Maybe he says, this is the splash you could make. Maybe Rubenstein's interested in that and kind of pushes Elias a bit and promises him the money to go and get a Blake Snell. And with this Orioles rotation, which it is huge to have Corbin Burnes, but large questions about Kyle Bradish and John Means and their availability heading into this season, if you go with a 1-2 of Burnes and Snell, you are feeling so much better about this team heading into 2024, or even Burnes and Montgomery makes you feel better about this team. So again, not saying he's going to do it, but sale getting done before opening day, which would be great, is a lot more likely at this point. Rubenstein's even been a little more public the last couple of weeks. He's gone to 2 Orioles spring training games at Ed Smith Stadium in Sarasota. Both times he's walked around the concourse, chatting with and taking pictures with fans. And, the first time he was sitting up in the booth with John Angelos for most of the game and then went down in the concourse. And I'm sure Angelos was like, how did you walk around the concourse without getting booed? People wanted to take pictures with you? Probably couldn't believe it. Yeah, John, it's not being an owner. It's the way you own the team that people don't want to take pictures with you. I'm sure John Angelos was like, how did you even walk around there? Why would you do that? Well, Rubenstein's kind of loved by Orioles fans right now because he's taking the team away from Angelos. And we're one step away at this point. Again, when the sale happens, when it's finalized, when the vote is approved, Rubenstein will be the control person. He will own 40% of the Orioles along with his group. John Angelos will still stay on in some capacity. The Angeloses will still own 30% of the team. And then the other 30% is kind of among those other investors that first bought in along with Peter Angelos back in the 90s. I still think it's kind of unclear what happens to that final 30%. But what we do know is that once Peter Angelos does pass away, then John Angelos will sell his remaining 30% to Rubenstein, or at least Rubenstein will have the option to buy that final 30%, and all signs point to he will. And so Rubenstein would have, over 70% of the team at that point, but he is still being anointed as the control person and does own the largest percentage, and he will be the one, once this is voted in, to make those decisions. Even though Angelos will still be on board, it will be Rubenstein's decisions to make, and that is all we can ask for at this point. But looking more towards things on the field, we had some news happen and some games played over the weekend. And coming up next, wanted to talk about the pitching news from the weekend for the O's, both on and off the field, as we march closer and closer to opening day. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, you can get buckets at FanDuel, and you can also get ready for the Major League Baseball season. You can make every moment more at FanDuel. It's got everything you need, from same-game parlays to over-unders to in-game prop bets, anything you could need from the NBA season, from college basketball. I mean, the madness of March is already underway, and it really gets going in a couple weeks from now. And then you got the baseball season coming ever so soon. So just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. And if you're a new customer and you join today, you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started now. So we're back here on a Monday episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast. O's with 4 games over the weekend since we last talked. 1 Friday, 1 Saturday, and then they had these split squad games, both against the Blue Jays, 1 in Sarasota and 1 in Dunedin on Sunday as well, to wrap up the weekend. And ho-hum, it was a lot more winning for the Orioles in spring training. I'm not sure how they do it, but they just continue to do it. 1 Friday, 1 Saturday, and then a win and a tie in the 2 games on Sunday. I mean, the most unstoppable spring training team of all time is now 14-2-1, I believe, so far this spring. The wins don't really usually translate to wins in the regular season, but it's kind of similar to, how the Ravens, I believe their streak ended in 2023, but the Ravens had that insane streak of like 5 straight years they hadn't lost a preseason game. And it's kind of like, well, it doesn't mean you're a great team in the regular season, but what it does say is you probably have better depth than a lot of other teams. And that's what the Ravens would generally show. And I think that's what maybe a little bit, if you're going to take anything away from it, is that the Orioles are showing that they have some really good depth. And when the prospects come in and the second and third line guys come in, they are still better than what those other teams are putting out there. But on the pitching side this weekend, I would say number one biggest news is on Sunday, the Orioles named their 2024 opening day starter, the guy who will take the mound on Thursday, March 28th at Oriole Park at Camden Yards against the Angels on opening day. And to no surprise, that opening day starter is Corbin Burnes. Now, Brandon Hyde talked about it on Sunday, saying Burnes pretty much knew what was happening. That was the plan all along, but Hyde gave him a call Sunday just to confirm it. And Corbin Burnes was excited after his start on Sunday. Now, this will be Burnes' third consecutive opening day start. He started each of the last two seasons on opening day with the Brewers. He was their number 2 starter at the beginning of the 2021 season, the year where he eventually went on to win the National League Cy Young Award. And for Corbin Burnes, this is the guy who the Orioles brought in. They gave up a lot to give up Joey Ortiz and DL Hall and a prospect for most likely only 1 year of Corbin Burnes, but this is what they brought him here to be, the true ace of this staff. And I think even if Kyle Bradish were fully healthy, Burnes still would have been the opening day starter for the O's. And obviously with Bradish out, it's going to be Corbin Burnes. Last 2 years on opening day hasn't gone amazing for Burnes. Last year at Wrigley Field against the Cubs, 5 innings, 4 runs, 4 hits, 3 Ks, 3 walks, and a hit batter against the Cubs on opening day. And then in 2022, it was also opening day at Wrigley against the Cubs for Burnes. And that one slightly better, but pretty similar. 5 innings, 3 runs on 4 hits, 4 Ks, 3 walks, and a home run allowed in that game. But what Burnes has done in his career the last 2 times, he's gotten a little better and better. After opening day, just maybe takes him a little bit of time to settle into a season. But I will say, back in 2021, when he kicked off the year he won the Cy Young, he started game 2 of the year for the Brewers, 6 scoreless with 11 strikeouts in that one. So he's still been known to have a good start to kick off his season. Now, Burnes did get hit around a little bit in his spring training start on Sunday against the Blue Jays. Now, he started the game at Ed Smith Stadium in Sarasota. That was the game Sunday that was not televised, that did not have the StatCast data, only had a radio broadcast. Of course, when the Orioles were in Dunedin, the Blue Jays facility, that was broadcasted by Sportsnet in Toronto and also had the StatCast data. But Burnes, the start that you can only hear on the radio, 3 innings, 5 runs, 6 hits, 2 Ks, a walk, and he did give up 2 homers, 1 to Ernie Clement, 1 to Brian Severn, 2 kind of borderline major leaguers, guys fighting for one of the last spots on the Blue Jays bench. But again, Burnes will say it, everyone will say it, I will say it. Spring training results don't matter. It's about getting your work in. He did leave the game in the 3rd, then came back and pitched in the 4th because, hey, it's spring training. There are no rules. You can just do that. You don't want a guy's pitch count getting too high. Him giving up 2 home runs in a spring training start, not worrying at all. He will be fine. He will be ace level when he takes the mound for the Orioles. But he wasn't the only impressive one on Sunday and over this weekend. Wanted to look at Cade Povich, who pitched in the game Saturday on the road against the Braves. Now, that game did not have StatCast, but it did have one of the Braves' 2-camera broadcasts, which honestly is good enough because one of those cameras is the center field cam, which allows you to see the pitches and how they move. And Povich looked really good again on Saturday. Now, he was pitching more so against, not the tippy-top Braves order, but 3 innings, 1 unearned run, 2 hits, 4 Ks, and 1 walk. And for the second straight outing for Cade Povich this spring, the stuff looked really good. He threw all 5 of the pitches. He was mixing it well. The off speeds looked good. He was throwing a lot more strikes than we saw from him in AAA Norfolk last year. Now, again, this doesn't mean he's going to make the opening day roster. Almost certainly he will begin the year in the Norfolk Tides rotation, but he's going to be a piece the O's may turn to in the big leagues at some point this year. And it's really nice to see Povich kind of settling in these big league spring training games. And the stuff is great. If you're just looking at pure stuff, he's got the best out of any current Orioles pitching prospect. But the command eludes him, and sometimes he's very inconsistent. This looked good. This looked very good on Saturday. Looking not as good, but still somewhat impressive, was Albert Suarez, who started the game in Dunedin on Sunday against the Blue Jays. So they had the StatCast. We had the broadcast of that one. And Suarez didn't do what he did against the Phillies Tuesday. Remember when he went 3 scoreless innings with 7 strikeouts, and everybody was like, who in the world is Albert Suarez? Well, he did give up 3 runs in the first inning on Sunday, but settled in after that and ended up going 4 innings and giving up just those 3 runs. And, 3 scoreless innings to end his outing. And the velocity was not quite the 97 that he was Tuesday. He was more 94 to 96 with the fastball Sunday. but that fastball still played. 8 whiffs on 17 swings on the fastball, 11 swings and misses in total for Suarez in his 4 innings. Still really good numbers for him. Again, a little step down from what we saw Tuesday, but I think all in all, that still keeps him in the mix to potentially make the Orioles opening day roster. Because he's here on a non-roster invite with a minor league deal, it's more than likely he'll just begin the year in the Tides rotation. But if anything were to happen early in the year, where another pitcher got injured, a move needed to be made, it's more likely that someone like Suarez, if the O's needed somebody to come up and make 2 or 3 starts, it's much more likely that it would be Suarez rather than go with, one of the prospects, Justin Armbruster or Chayce McDermott or Cade Povich, just because you don't want to put a fork in the development for 2 weeks to just make some spot starts. Suarez seems like a guy who's 34. He's been there, done that, could do that job. And hopefully he does want to stick around in Norfolk and hopefully wait for that chance. Now, last guy that was really impressive was another prospect I just mentioned, and that is Chayce McDermott. He pitched the final 3 innings of the televised game against the Blue Jays on Sunday. It was 3 scoreless, 2 hits, 6 strikeouts, and 1 walk for the Orioles right-hander, who I think is the current best pitching prospect in the Orioles system. I mean, he got 11 swings and misses on 21 swings. More than half the time when Blue Jays hitters swung against McDermott on Sunday, they swung and missed. Now, again, it was the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings of a spring training game, and there were absolutely exactly 0 Blue Jays regular starters. And quite frankly, he may have faced Alejandro Kirk. I believe that was the only true big leaguer that he faced at all of those 3 innings that he pitched in relief on Sunday. But still, the stuff was good. 6 whiffs on the fastball, 94-96. They swung at the slider 5 times and swung and missed 4 of those 5 times. The breaking stuff is ridiculous from McDermott. I saw him throw a really good changeup that he dropped in for a called strike 3 in this game as well. That's a pitch he's working more and more on. It's just impressive stuff. I like Cade Povich. I'm going to say I love Chayce McDermott. He's my favorite pitching prospect in the system. And I will stick with what I've been saying about McDermott. He could start this year. I think it's more looking at a 2025 starter potentially for the O's rotation. But at some point this season, McDermott is going to come up and help the Orioles bullpen immensely. That's how good that stuff is. I am very excited for that day to come. There was one drop-off, one probably bad and concerning performance from this weekend that I wanted to touch on, and really it was just Caleb Ort. He pitched in that televised game on Sunday. He's very much on this roster bubble, trying to win, maybe the last bullpen spot for the Orioles. They like the fastball. They're working on the cutter. He did not look good. The command was terrible. Multiple walks. Couldn't even finish his 1 inning. Had to leave with 2 outs. Also in the middle of the outing, got checked on by the trainer. Did stay in the game, but just something to monitor. And with the struggles there, and maybe there's something he's dealing with, his chances of being in the opening day bullpen are less and less. And he's one of a lot of guys competing for those bullpen spots. Even one slip up can hurt you. That is maybe what happened to Caleb Ort on Sunday. While there are plenty of good pitching performances to look at, also some good performance on the hitting side as well. We will get to those to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV Stick. It's my personal favorite. That you can plug into your existing TV, and it provides you access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. So whether it's that opening weekend for baseball that's coming up soon, or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have Fire TV. They've got all the channels you want, everything you need in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. So if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this one. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. So to finish off today's episode, I wanted to talk about the big hitting performances from some of the Orioles over the weekend in the 4 spring training games that were played since we last talked. And we got to start with Coby Mayo, because man, oh man, what he did Saturday in that game against the Braves, it's getting me more and more excited for Coby Mayo. Had a 2-run double down the right field line, kind of shot a line drive the other way off of Chris Sale, which was really nice to see, although we know he hits lefties well. That's Chris Sale. That's a legitimately good lefty. And It was also pretty funny to see, even in spring training, the Orioles just jumped all over Chris Sale in that game Saturday. He just can't escape the O's these past couple of years. He's not having a good time when he faces Baltimore. But the ball that was ridiculous was the home run that Mayo hit, I believe, in the 6th inning of that game on Saturday. It came off Aaron Bummer, who was a reliever that I wanted the Orioles to go after this offseason, lefty who was traded from the White Sox to the Braves for a solid little package of prospects. He's a really, really good reliever with high ground ball rates, some really interesting stuff, multiple years of control. Mayo gets a hanging breaking ball, and he demolishes this ball. Pull side homer down the left field line. We didn't have the StatCast data for Saturday's game, so I have not seen a distance or an exit velocity. But off the bat and where it landed, I mean, we're looking at easily 400 plus feet, easily over 110 miles per hour. It seemed like off the bat, that ball was demolished. And Mayo did have a lot of homers that looked like that in the minor leagues last year, and he will continue to have them. But it's just more and more exciting every time you watch him play. And he did all that. And maybe the most exciting development of the weekend was Andy Koska's story about Coby Mayo in the Baltimore Banner, which I believe came out on Saturday. And it talked about how Mayo really improved his defense this offseason, specifically with the way he throws from third base. A good look into Andy's article. Please go and read it. But the synopsis was that Mayo was throwing too much over the top when he was throwing from third, and he was spiking too many throws. And it was really having him struggle when he would throw to second to try and turn a double play. But he brought it down to more of the 3/4 throwing angle, which you see from a lot more infielders. And his accuracy was just immensely better. There were quotes in there from Orioles infield coach Tony Mansolino, who was basically like, listen, this is a completely different fielder this spring than he looked like last spring. And everything in that story is great. Please go and read it. But it just makes you think even higher of Coby Mayo. And again, I still don't predict he will make the opening day roster. I do predict he will be an impact player for the Orioles at some point in 2024. But man, oh man, I continue to just like leave the door open just a little bit for like, could he make this opening day roster? I mean, maybe if they, moved Ramon Arias in some sort of trade and they felt there was an opening for a right-handed bat, that's how impressive he's been. It'll probably be a start of the year in Norfolk, but I can't wait till he comes up to the big leagues. And of course, the other guy we can't wait till he comes up to the big leagues is Jackson Holliday, who continues to put on a show, and what a show it was on Sunday. Luckily for us, Holliday was in the split squad game that was at the Blue Jays, so it had the StatCast and it had the broadcast. He demolished a grand slam. Now, StatCast for some reason was like broken when he hit it, so we never got the distance on it, but we did get that it was 103 miles per hour off the bat of Jackson Holliday. Bases loaded in the first inning against Yusei Kikuchi, a legitimate left-handed starter who is good and will be in the Blue Jays rotation this year once again, and just whacked this thing out to right center field for a grand slam. Pimped the home run pretty nicely as well. And you see Holliday, not just grand slam off a big league pitcher, but left on left off a legitimate big league starter who is in his division, who he's probably going to face a lot over the next couple of years. That was awesome to see. That was absolutely awesome to see from Jackson Holliday. I'm sticking with it. Again, I'm still like 55-45 in my predictions of he makes the roster versus he doesn't, but just put Jackson Holliday on this opening day roster. Let's see it. Let's see it from day one. Let's see what he can do. Again, results aren't everything, and one at bat isn't everything, but Holliday said it after the game Sunday. He said, it can't hurt, can it? In terms of that grand slam helping him make the opening day roster. Like, let's go. That was just cool to see. That was just really cool to see. And then just some shout outs to the other guys who hit homers this weekend, because in those two split squad games, it actually, which is very rare in spring training, to the split squad against the same team. So at your place, at Ed Smith Stadium, the Orioles are playing the Blue Jays, and in Dunedin, the Orioles are playing the Blue Jays. You don't see that much. There was like 10 total home runs in those games, maybe even more actually, between the two teams. The one was a tie. The other was an 11-6 Orioles win. Anthony Santander in the game in Dunedin homered from both sides of the plate. That was nice to see for him. Colton Cowser, Adley Rutschman, and James McCann each hit homers in the game at Ed Smith Stadium. Now, Colton Cowser's homer was off a righty, not a lefty, but he continues to be hot. Also, Ramon Arias homered in that game as well. And then Ryan McKenna hit a homer in Dunedin, which he hit off of lefty Yenesis Cabrera, who is a legitimate lefty who will be in the Blue Jays bullpen this year, throws really hard from the left side. And McKenna put a swing on that ball, hit it to dead center field, 107 off the bat, traveled 409 feet for a solo shot. I don't think, even with the walk-off homer he had last year, even when he got a little hot at one point at the plate last season, I can't remember the last time I've seen Ryan McKenna put a swing on a ball like he did on that home run on Sunday. So I think right now, personally, he is on the outside looking in, trying to get onto the Orioles opening day roster, but they've rostered him for the last 3 years. There is still a space for Ryan McKenna if he can pick it up with the bat. We know the defense is there. We'll see. He's not out of the mix yet, and that swing, if he's making more of those, that's certainly going to help him. But those were kind of my big observations from the weekend. If I missed anything, if you had anything else to add from those Orioles 4 games this weekend, of course, put it in the comments here. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube, and leave a 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever. Of course, we can't end the show here without telling you the winner of our giveaway, because last week we reached over 6,000 subscribers on YouTube, and that is thanks to all of you. And I did say once we get over 6,000 subscribers, I will do a giveaway on the podcast. And the giveaway was this Jim Palmer statue. It's a replica of the statue that is at Camden Yards. It was given away at the ballpark a few years ago. The Jim Palmer statue is the giveaway, and you had to do 2 things to enter. Number 1 was subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, and number 2 was leave in the comments of any YouTube video last week on the pod who the Orioles' best pitcher since Mike Mussina has been, because Palmer was great. Then we had a couple of years it was okay. Then you got Mussina, and then he left in the early 2000s to go to New York, and there was a lot of pitchers, not a lot of good pitchers, anything close to Mussina. So the question was, who was the best one since Mussina? And I got a lot of responses. Thank you all for entering in. Randomly drew it on Saturday, and coming out with the winner here. Congratulations to Ryan Hying. I'm going to say Hying. Ryan, I'm sorry if I got your last name wrong. It might be Haying. It's Ryan, Heying. YouTube name is Ryan Haying 4274. Congratulations. You are the winner of the Jim Palmer statue. Ryan's comment saying, since Mike, the best current pitcher so far is easily Bradish, which I can honestly get behind, because the season that Kyle Bradish had last year, nobody's been close to a season like that in terms of Orioles starting pitchers since Mike Mussina. And Ryan said, for this year and in the next few years, though, I'm taking G-Rod, Grayson Rodriguez. So, hey, I'd love to see Grayson Rodriguez turn out to be Mike Mussina. I think we would all be happy with that. But Ryan, congratulations on the win. Please send me an email at lockedonorioles@gmail.com to claim your prize. Again, that is lockedonorioles@gmail.com. And if you have any comments, questions for the show, anything about the O's, you can also email me right there. Again, that is lockedonorioles@gmail.com. And don't worry, there'll be more giveaways on the pod. Next up, let's get to 7,000 subscribers, and we'll do another giveaway here on the podcast. But that'll do it for today's episode. We are back tomorrow as we creep closer and closer to opening day. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.